Okay, hello, Anita.
Hey Devin, good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too. So I wanted to ask you about Rage Club and actually it's not necessarily specific questions, but I really wanted to just get you talking about um different things about your experience with Rage Club and uh your experience also with unmixing emotions, which is something that you got as a big takeaway from a Rage Club you participated in. But then even more than that, I think since I've known you and and kind of getting to know you better and better, I really get there's a there's some kind of a stand that you take in the world for people um, to overcome trauma or to make trauma irrelevant in their lives or heal it so that they can really live and really be who and what they are. And and I and I get that somehow rage work and feelings work has been a part of that. And so I'd love to just hear you, start from anywhere and maybe I fire some more specific questions at you, but like to talk about the work that you care so much about and also how Rage Club um, or you holding space for people to feel their anger, what role that plays for you.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for such a juicy intro. I feel like I have so many things to talk about now. um, I am really passionate about healing work. I think I have a real desire, not only for my own life, but for other people's lives, for people to really do what they want with their lives. And I often find that unresolved material, trauma, things like that can hold us back from stepping into the life that we really desire. And I'll just share I grew up in a family where, well, there are two things happening. One is that there were outbursts of rage in given moments that were, I think, really terrifying for me as a child. And then growing up, there was like this very subdued, like there was no rage or anger expressed in my family. So it was like no
Hmm.
one was expressing. And so I had an experience of both. But for most of my life, it was just like um, my parents demonstrated a lot of peacefulness, right? And I always kind of felt this like mismatch because I had experienced anger in the family earlier when I was a younger person. And so there was always like, gosh, I didn't know how to relate to my own anger. And in fact, at some point in my journey, I think I was mid 20s, I realized that I was just repressing my anger. I couldn't really access it. I didn't have a lot of awareness of feeling anger. And
Hmm.
so in my early 20s, I found an anger release workshop and I went for a weekend and it was like a group therapy experience. And there was a plastic bat and I hit this thing and I got to scream. And it was like, it was really, really transformational, that experience, because then I started being able to feel my anger after that.
Hmm.
And I'll just share that when Club came into my life, it was no joke, about 20 years later. And I had been seeking how to I find like anger work, uh, like not anger management, because if you Google anything related to anger, what comes up is anger management. That wasn't my issue. My issue was that I needed to have a place to keep expressing it. And so uh, 20 years later, a friend of mine introduced me to Rage Club, which was being facilitated by you. And then I entered this space. And it was like a totally new take on anger work. And I just think about one thing that felt really different from my first experience with anger work and the Rage Club experience
Hmm.
is this notion that anger could be used as a fuel. That in the first in the first anger work, it's like hitting with the bat and getting it all out, and just getting it out. And in Rage Club, what I've been discovering is there's a way where I can access it, I can feel it, I can do these exercises that are being presented. And then I can actually use that energy that just got cultivated from this thing that's totally natural. It's like a natural energy source. And then starting to relate to it differently, realizing that like I can use my anger to make something happen. I can use my anger to stop something from happening. I can use my anger to do something I don't want to do necessarily, but need to do.
Hmm.
So there was like kind of this new experience of anger. And I was so inspired by my first experience that a year later I just gathered friends and put a second one together, because I'm like, wow, this is valuable. This is valuable because I still need help accessing it. It's not like I did one thing and I'm just a new person in relationship with anger. It's like an ongoing relationship that I'm developing with my anger and my okayness with it and my expression of it. Yeah, so that's kind of my journey to where I am right now. But I feel so interested in this work because two things come forward. I work as a somatic coach, so I support people, and what I notice is there's like a repression of anger often, and uh, often people are dealing with some kind of stuckness in their life. And then on
Hmm.
the other side, there's like an expression of anger that feels out of control or unhealthy for people. And so they're like trying to navigate like to how to deal with these outbursts that are happening. And the thing that keeps coming forward for me is that both are valid entry points for getting actual into rage practices, to that both people, both types, the one that is like exploding out of nowhere and the one that can't seem to access it. I think that rage practices are really valuable for both. Do you agree about that, by the way? This is my kind of
Totally.
theory so far.
Yes, I mean, one of the things um, that that I experience, and maybe you too, is that I have both of those, what I'd call unconscious relationship to anger. And one unconscious relationship to anger is like, anger. I'm not angry. I'm not an angry person. Or it's just like, maybe I have anger, but I really cannot access it. And then the other is what you just said about these uncontrolled outbursts. And that in both cases they're unconscious, meaning I am not consciously applying my anger to my life. I don't have agency or authority with my anger. And and I think the paths in some ways are very similar for a person to, because in both cases a person really needs to practice getting their a conscious relationship with their anger, which I just said the word practice, but I'd say that's a lot of what Rage Club is just, we're so trained to think that anger is bad or violent. And it can be an unconscious relationship with anger, but that means we don't have much conscious access to it because it's already dismissed as bad and something we shouldn't feel. So it's like, why even try? And so um, one of the questions I had for you, and I think you spoke to it a little bit, but like that anger, that feeling, just beginning to consciously feel anger and use it, there's some way that really contributes to the healing journey and to the journey of, say, in some ways maybe getting one's power back or their own authority back. Could you talk a little about that, how that's been for you or for clients that you hold space for?
Yes. Something that comes forward right away for me is actually the mixed emotions part that I want to speak to, because I have my own personal experience with this, but I'm seeing this big time in reflected in the clients that I work with.
Hmm.
And so what I often will find is that people that tend to have more repression with their anger, and this is maybe a generalization, but I'm just going to speak to it the way I'm seeing it so far. When there's more of a repression of anger, it's like we'll start touching anger and then it just goes into sadness. It's like
Hmm.
we touch the anger and then it goes into tears, weeping, sobbing, right? And so I had an experience a few years ago where I had this really really painful breakup experience, and I was struggling to move through it, struggling to move through into a healing process with it. And it was about, I think, 2 years into, after the breakup, 2 years in, I was still having the experience where I would feel this anger come up, and then it would be, there'd be like a tidal wave of sadness and tears.
Hmm.
And then that's when I was given this page out of a book that was related to mixed emotions and how to start working with them. And so, what I would do is this practice. Is it okay to talk about the practice itself?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And
So,
if you would, just to talk about also what mixed emotions are, because we have this term in at least in the United States of I have mixed feelings about this, and it's really something different than that. The
right.
mixed, yeah.
Yeah. And so, a mixed emotion. So, there's four main feelings: anger, sadness, fear, and gladness, right? And so could say that a little differently, but that's the words that came out. And when these emotions are mixed in varying degrees, they create a different experience. And
Hmm.
so what I have read is that, for example, anger and sadness mix, um, they can create depression. And so when I think of anger and sadness mixing, that's how I felt. It just in this downward moving, like I felt like I would be pulled down into it. Like I would start feeling the anger, and then I get pulled downward by my sadness. And um, so, all these four feelings can be mixed in different ways, and then they create this other type of result that is.
Hmm.
I don't know that I could name any of the other ones off the top of my head. If you want to name any other mixing, like the result of.
I think, well, I think it'd be interesting for anyone watching this if you actually just try these things out, like really in your own body of like letting your anger, your real anger come up and then bringing sadness also up at the same time. And even though you might not know how to do this mentally, to just see what happens if you allow your emotional body to mix those, so you can do that with any of the mixes. What happens if I do this with anger and fear? And we can give words to them, but you might recognize some of them. You might recognize that, say for me, a big one that I spent time on mixing was having fear and sadness happening at the same time. So really mixing fear and sadness. And for me, that was one of the, in some ways, that was the defining emotional experience of my life. And so to just start to see what do these different things do, when you mix them, you could find your own words for them. But yeah, I would say that would be my proposal.
I
Anyway,
love
back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so part of this was my big mix with this relationship ending was anger and sadness. And so I learned about unmixing mixed emotion. I ended up going to the beach every day for about 14 days. And I would get down to the beach, and part of unmixing mixed emotions is like using my anger to like pull this mixture out of my body and really pull it out, like, oh, moving it out, and like just allowing my body to become so tense with my own anger, and then just start pulling them apart, like as if this was like a sticky goo that got stuck together. And I had to like use the tension of my body and my anger to pull it apart. And it's like, ah,
Yeah.
ah, ah. And then, putting this is my fear on this, excuse me, this is my anger on this shelf, and this is my sadness on this shelf. And then I have this opportunity to go, okay, I'm going to work with the anger first. And so it's like bringing that anger back into my body and then just allowing myself to rage, like rage at the ocean, scream my face off, say everything that I didn't say, so everything that I think, and go, 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 go. And then I would often find this tipping point where the sadness would start to, come in. And I would remove that anger and I put the sadness in. And then I would sob and I would sob and I would sob.
Hmm.
And I did this every day for about 14 days. And at the end of it, it was like I had popped out of that experience. It was like all of a sudden I was giving my pure anger its airtime and my pure sadness its airtime. And then I felt like I just wasn't thinking about that relationship very much anymore.
Hmm.
It was like an actual doorway to like freeing myself from this nonstop looping that was going on. So, when I find stuff like this that is experiential and has such an actual impact on my life, I just want to tell other people about it. I like want people to discover this. And so, I notice this with my clients. There's this drooping energy in the space sometimes, which is beautiful. Like I welcome that too, but I have this knowledge that we can actually like start unmixing these emotions. We can actually use your conscious anger to kind of transform your inner experience. And and actually, Devin, I was wondering if you might speak to, my understanding is that anger is often the one that is the most useful to begin with, to begin the journey of really getting into conscious feelings work. And can you talk about why anger work is the entry?
Yes. One of the things is that, I mean, one of the main things is that anger has a very particular quality that's different from the other feelings, sadness and fear, and also joy. Where anger has this kind of push thing, and if you just use your will, you can activate this pushing, and with this, um, you can create the space for yourself. If you let yourself really be as angry as you are, and we all have anger, every human being has this possibility to go to 100% anger for no reason, for no reason. If you practice that, you start to feel, oh my God, there's space around me. Like maybe there was stuff encroaching that space, but now there is space around me. And it's not just in the kind of energetic physical, but also in the heart. There's enough space when the anger is present for a person to be able to hold space for their sadness. And sadness isn't pushing. Sadness is more something that it like wells up, and there's a kind of surrender that the physical body needs to be able to do with sadness, of just allowing it to come. And when the anger's there, it's like there's a foundation for that to happen. And same with fear, it's like there needs to be something stable for fear, which is more like this kind of, it's a different kind of surrender than sadness. It's not so much the welling up, it's more almost like a falling into fear, allowing the fear to come. So this is part of why it's really valuable to start with anger. And there's more I could say about that, but this is kind of the very beginning. And there's also something with anger where each of the feelings has a different kind of taboo connected to it. Like with sadness, it might be something like it makes you weak, or you shouldn't be sad because there's so much to be grateful for, or all these different things. And with fear, it's there's something like it makes you sort of small, it makes you small and helpless. And with anger, it's like you can really be a villain with anger. You can really that's part of the taboo. It's like you can be violent. You think of some of the words associated with anger. It's like for a woman, you're a bitch. If you're angry, if you have your anger and you're clear, you're a bitch. And they say, I've heard kind of that for men, it's more okay to be angry, but that's not been my lived experience. Is that men are just aggressive assholes or whatever. And so there's something I think about breaking those pretty big taboos about just letting yourself embrace something that is so rejected socially, that really allows a person to inhabit um, bigger domains of being human. And so that's another part of just starting with anger.
Yeah, and one thing, there are two things that stood out to me. And one, you talked about feeling anger for no reason. And that
Right.
was, it's interesting if you think about feeling anger for a reason, you're already at a point of being like triggered into anger.
You're already a
But
victim of the anger. Yeah, right.
right. And so that Rage Club is an opportunity to feel anger for no reason, to actually show up and access this kind of energy that's available in a practice form, in a way where you're not getting overtaken by anger to experience it, but you're actually working with it. And I don't know why I keep thinking of it as fire. It's like transformative. I just think of anger as like transformative energy. And I just think there's an opportunity for each person to get in touch with something that's already a natural part of them. And so if they're in touch with this thing that's already natural, they're coming more into a state of full expression of, this is a part of me. And if I can come into my okayness with it and use it and tend to it, that's what it was saying, like the tending, like the fire tender,
Mm,
it's like I can tend to this part and integrate it into my experience and love it, like have a different relationship with it. And that's what I'm going for.
yes. Well, so I feel like we could keep talking about this, but maybe this is enough for right now. Uh, so we'll be hosting together or space holding together for an online introduction to Rage Club on September 21st,
That's
which is a
right, 10 a.m.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 a.m. Pacific to 11:30. Is that
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, so it'll be 90 minutes. So this is invitation. If you watch this and have questions, you could reach out to me or to Anita. And thank you for Anita um for sharing. I love hearing you speak about what you've gotten about anger, because it wakes up so many things in me about just how valuable the space of Rage Club is, and just doing this work not just by yourself but as a team, with a team of people.
Yeah, and thank you for doing this work, because it was literally the thing I'd been looking for 20 years. Like I just needed this, it was like my next step. And so I'm so thrilled to be like stepping into leading as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to turn this off. Stop.